name is Oscar and I'm a student. I decided to talk about socialism. This is really what I'm going to go in depth in, explain what socialism is, who first started it, why socialism is in our world today, and how people enforce it and indoctrinate nations and young women and men to do something that they first intended not to do. I will be talking about the tactics that leaders enforce and practice on, in addition to brainwashing, and what are the signs of socialism, especially what we see today. I'll simply show how socialism is in our country today and can really relate to history. I will connect the dots from history and see what really happened, so you will be able to see how history really truly repeats itself. As you can see, I made a tree. You might wonder why, and I'll talk about it later. So before we talk about socialism, we have to know what it is in the first place. Socialism is simply a structured society of a ruling and ruled class. An example of socialism is if you have two cows. The government takes one and gives one to the neighbor. Communism is very similar. You have two cows, but the government takes both. They promise you milk, but then they make you starve. So, socialism creates communism. But the real question is, does socialism work, or has it worked? Simply on paper, it sounds like an amazing plan. Everyone gets what they want, right? But does it really work in the long term, or has it worked in history? Let's start in the beginning. In 380 BC, Plato was sort of the guy that originated it. He writes in the passing of Atlantis, which was a highly structured civilization on an island that sinks in the sea. Plato thought that Atlantis was the perfect structured society, and democracy was an unstructured society. So this is the meaning. As you can see, people rule. The main characteristic of democracy is tolerance. Everyone tolerates people, then they tolerate each other, then people a little off, then a lot off, then tolerates lawlessness, and that turns into chaos. Then you have the people that say, can someone come along and fix this mess? And then we see a governor that comes along and saying, I can fix it, I just need emergency powers. Together this makes up the ruling class. So the ruling class is above the law, politically connected, supported by the commoner class. The ruled class is everyone that is provided for, no one owns property, no families, the government decides who gets to have children, etc. So now we have a small understanding of what socialism is. How are the ways that the world traps us into it? It starts with two simple but dangerous things: free stuff and fear. So before I go on, can you think of any fear or free stuff in the last decade, or especially in the last couple of years? Of course you can. Once you get people into fear, they will give up their freedom for the promise of security. Then for free stuff, it trades freedom for dependency. Everyone loves free stuff, right? But when you become dependent on free stuff, then everyone begins to threaten to hold back, get hooked up, and they give up their independence. It is how a drug dealer can take over a neighborhood in two ways. Through fear, by guns, shootings, making people panic with fear, and submitting them to pay protection money. Secondly, the drug dealer can give away free drugs when people are hooked. Say if you want more, you must steal or prostitute yourself later on. Another example can be a hunter. They catch animals using guns or using bait. They both work. So, let's move to Hegel. He was a German philosopher in the 18th century. And we can see his way of manipulation that he created. He created his theory of dialectics that influenced Darwin and Marx. Marx was a member of the Young Hegelians, which was his radical student group in Berlin that he created. And the Hegelian dialectics is a triangle. It might sound confusing, but this is how it works. So you start with a thesis that goes to antithesis, and it ends with a synthesis. So you start with the status quo, you lead to a discord, which is basically a problem that is really bad, and then you end with an answer that is half as bad. And that is created as the starting point. You create a problem that is really bad, and satisfy with something that's half as bad. Then you do it again and again and again. Each time, you settle the people would give up a little bit of their freedom and concentrate in the hands of their state without you noticing it. Don't think all the tyrannical leaders killed millions of people overnight. It was a process. You've heard the analogy that when you drop a frog in a pot of boiling water, it will hop out. But if you gradually warm the water, it will sit there and happily boil to death without making a noise. That is what we're seeing today. They get us into fear, and when people are into fear, they trade their freedom for security. So how do you create this antithesis? Karl Marx said, you send in agitators, organizers, and agent provocateurs. Their job is to find people with grievances, stir them to riot, and when the country gets into fear and in panic, you come along to restore order and use power. We simply know it as critical theory. You would study a group and see the groups. And you will call one victim and the other oppressor, and orchestrate the protests and riots. When it's destabilized, everyone panics when they're using power, promising to fix it. Wow, sounds familiar, right? Let's move to Germany. So in the 1920s to the 1930s, Germany was a republic. But then someone started a political party in Germany called the Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party. You might also know it as National Arbeiter, which is the German word for worker, also known as the Nazis. And the man behind this is Adolf Hitler. Hitler's people that he created were called the Brown Shirts, also nicknamed Sturmbannführer, which means stormtrooper, because they would storm into meetings of Hitler's opponents and shut down the meetings and leave it into chaos. So as we know today, as May the 4th be with you, even Star Wars in today's age is impacted by the Nazis party, which is very, very scary. And then they would lock arms and block buildings. Imagine people doing that today. Then they went into cities, they smashed windows, set on fire thousands of stores owned by Jews. Sound familiar? Also, the capital got set on fire. Do you see a resemblance? Hitler's people used the crisis to falsely accuse of his political opponents, to have them hunted down, put into prison, falsely accused, and shot without trial. When the dust settled, Hitler didn't have any political opponents left. Wow, doesn't this sound like today's news articles? And Germany transitioned from a republic to a dictatorship. So they do something called blame shifting, which Sigmund Freud coined the term. We have all met someone like this, like little kids. They say, I'm not the mean one, you're the mean one. Karl Marx says, accuse others of what you do, and it's got into politics. Where they do the hateful thing and accuse you of being hateful. They do the intolerant thing and accuse you of being intolerant. They project their negative qualities onto you. You accuse them of exactly what you're doing. Why? Because they are trying to back themselves up. If it gets pointed back at them, the water is muddy, and the people don't know who to trust, and they get a pass. So after World War II, Germany, France, and England gave independence to their foreign colonies. Everything is hopeful because everyone has new countries, right? Except the KGB, which is the Russian Committee of Security. The KGB decides to send agents into countries and put forth critical theory. And they began to divide the people up. They would orchestrate protests into violence and bloodshed. Why bloodshed specifically? Because once blood is shed, people are emotionally upset and don't want to sit down and talk about stuff. Again, when have emotions and feelings been good in choices in our life? Once they are in fear, you can manipulate them very, very easily. It is called fear-mongering. It's a little tactic that is used. They would co-opt the media with bribes and threats to blame the new leader for the new country for all the problems. They would nurture the weaklings of the military, and when the country is panicking with the riots, they would do a rigged election to replace the leader. Wow, sounds familiar. 45 countries fell to communism this way, and let's not make it 46. It is called behind the Iron Curtain. At the same time, it's going on in China with Chairman Mao, but he does it a little differently. He uses crisis and having power, but a continuous revolution. He gives them no chance at all. A continuous crisis or pandemic to keep the people in constant fear. So when Stalin was in charge in Russia of 1934, this cartoon was published in the Chicago Tribune, and it's basically to spend under the guise of recovery. So that's like like $1 trillion stimulus program and infrastructure programs that are not intended to stimulate. It is called the Great Reset, where you totally spend until all the money is worthless. It's like the drug dealer. It's a backdoor to socialism. Two ways to enforce socialism. You can come in tanks, shoot them, and scare them, or you can bankrupt them until everyone is dependent on the government. We see that in the Great Depression. People went to the government for help, and FDR was happy to help, but in exchange was their independence and their freedom. So what really are the tactics in the way of brainwashing? So in 1980, a former communist, Yuri Bezmenov, came to America and basically spilled the beans. All he said is that they study groups. They find which ones they can pick on, and he set them in steps. The first is to demoralize people, infiltrate molders of public opinion, because you want to sway the people in the media, education, and even the pulpit. This can be a 20-year period. Next is the destabilizing phase. To spend, create debt and infrastructure. Third is to create a crisis incident, sparking riots. And lastly, coups and normalization. A great tactic is called deconstruction. It is basically a socialist tactic where you say negative things from a country's past to get emotionally detached, once again, feelings. Then you get them into a neutral state where they don't remember where they came from. And then from there, you can portray whatever you want positively in your way. This is also a sales technique. Let's say I'm a shampoo salesman. The first thing I want to do is tell all the negative things bad about your product. On the lines of, oh, there's chemicals, oh, you damaged your hair, etc. Now I got you into a neutral state. Your mind is open. Now you wonder what's out there, right? Now I'll give you my pitch for the new shampoo. It is an editing program for a culture. And the whole purpose is to take out the old memory, history, and put in the new. Now you know why education and history are so important fighting for. Because that's what they do. They go into the classroom, they tell negative things about the founders, like they took lands from India, it was about slavery, but they forgot that our founders gave us a government that we can be in charge of our lives. These kids are now neutral and can be brainwashed by a new pitch, any pitch, whether truth or lie. Examples might be LGBTQ, Islam, socialism, etc. And this is what we have and still am experiencing to this day. So let's look at our country now, more specifically, the COVID response. So as we saw, the first thing our leaders wanted were criminals out of jail. Why? Because it creates crime and chaos, especially in the big cities. What does that create? It influences people to move out. Who does it influence? Those with children's family, mostly pro-life, and able to afford to move out, better financially, economically, and part of usually one political party. But then who stays? Those that are dependent on entitlements, part of usually another political party. Then businesses close, they get looted, vandalized, and police are defunded. Then pro-business people move out, which were part of the first party. Then churches shut down, where pro-life and social conservatives gathered. Then high school and college students indoctrinated with Hate America are freely able to riot. So as a result, the net result of COVID is that more of one political party moves out of big cities, leaving the other party in monopoly control of city politics. So as we look at presidential elections, whoever wins the big cities wins the state. Whoever wins the state basically gets all the electoral votes, and how our presidents voted by electoral votes. Political advantage from one party by letting crime go up in the big cities by the COVID response. So if we do a little connect the dots, as Dr. Grant says, in America, the country is controlled by laws. The laws are controlled by politicians. Politicians are controlled by voters. Voters are controlled by public opinion. Public opinion is controlled by the media, education, internet, and most importantly, the church. If someone can control the media, education, and infiltrate the church and the internet, they can control what the public knows, what their opinion is, and it influences the voters, then to the politicians, changes the laws, then controls the country. Can you see it? So, how do you brainwash? The idea is you isolate someone with trauma, sensory deprivation, till they crave acceptance and normalcy. You put them through an isolation, maybe like staying in your homes, and they make people crave having things back to normal. Manipulating people's desire to fit and be accepted by a group or fear of rejection. Now everyone wants to be liked, especially on social media, and fit in with crowds, right? But at the beginning of American history, most of the country was Christian. So there were some people that were not Christian and wanted to be part of our group and want to change their lifestyle and behavior and have a basic Christian morality. Unfortunately, we lost that, and the other side has the gravitational pull. So, is socialism good or bad? That is the real question. Many people can find arguments for it being good and bad, but history is a clear portrayal of what socialism really can do to a community, nation, and generation. Margaret Thatcher, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, says, "The problem with socialism is that you run out of other people's money." This is so true. Socialism sounds great on paper, but once it is performed in real life, it will never work, at least for the long run. So it's the example that we hear all the time when people are working less but getting paid the same amount as someone else. That's the fallacy of the system. It doesn't work. You must have the incentive to do better than the next guy. In order to work more, you must have the incentive to earn more. Nothing in life is free, right? The mental effect on the people after the revolution was despair. Being controlled, they realized that they can't fight back anymore. That's pretty much what happened. That's exactly why it doesn't work. Just look at our culture today. Don't think ideas of socialism are in our country today. Just look at your Edison bill this year. Why are we getting charged not by usage, but by income? Free healthcare or free college? Or if you allow someone to get into college with a 2.5 GPA because of their ethnic group, and you deny someone else with a 3.5 GPA, something is wrong. The class warfare industry is cranking all the time. The problem with communist government, or government in general, is politics. But God created government, and man created politics. In a communist and socialist government, you have the source of everything, only one. You have no competition. If you have no competition, how do you have improvement? How do you think this car got to this car? How do you think companies and athletes keep on getting better through generations? Government mandates don't improve products, competition does. What we need is people to stand for their individual rights, and they have to know the facts and become informed. Do not listen to the mainstream media, but to be discerned in the Word of God. It is so important to have a good foundation rooted in Christ, because in the world there is nothing good, and our only hope is to trust in God. As you can see in my project, I have created a tree. Why a tree? Not only representing my project, but everyone's project you saw today. What does this tree represent? It can represent many things. It can represent our life. The roots are our foundation. This tree can also mean and represent a problem in life. Yes, we can use socialism, but any problem can relate. So bear with me, this is a little complicated. But if we want to fix the problem, we need to know 3 questions. What, why, and how. We first need to know what the problem is, obviously. Next, why is that the problem? If we don't know why the problem is the problem, then we basically don't know what the problem is. And that is a big problem. Does that make sense? And knowing the problem and knowing why the problem is the problem, but not fixing the problem, is better off not knowing the problem in the first place. Once we know why that is the problem, we can figure out how to fix it. I say this because we can't just surface the solution of every issue in our life. We have to fix the core root of each problem. Or else, let's say we cut the problem off at the branches or even at the tree, at the wood. Yes, you fix it temporarily, but the problem will never be fulfilled and fixed, and it will grow right back, and maybe even worse. This applies to everything. So next time you argue with your parents, be selfish, and be lazy. Please think, and solve it wisely. We have to take the roots out. What are the roots? According to the Bible, we have been created from a sinful nature. Our heart is wicked and man does bad things. This is the problem, sin. Simply to miss the mark. It is organically from our sinful nature to enforce socialism in our nations of the world today. Why? It is because people want power. They want to be God for themselves. This starts with power, control, and wealth. Will we have these virtues once in our life, or will we build our lives on a good, strong foundation upon the truth? We can't be easily tricked by this world. As we see in Matthew 7, it shows us to build our house on the rock, not the sand. The enemy are the ways. We have to be strong in the Word of God and know simply what is right and almost right, which is basically saying what is wrong in a pleasant way. We simply cannot hide and have to stand for what is right. So communists and socialists invade when good people do nothing. The United States is the prize that every radical wants to take because they want to destroy it. We are the target. People have to be strong in what they believe and have the moral courage to not be discouraged, demoralized, or swayed by this sort of thing. There is still no freer place in the world than the United States of America, if we can keep it. Just look back. Why did your parents or your parents' parents come here? Okay, now let's keep it that way. Ronald Reagan once said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on to do the same. So the question is, are we going to plan our lives on a strong foundation of truth, and produce good fruits, and fight for our freedom, or be part of the world? Ideas do lead to consequences, and we have to take care of the little things in life, or else how will we manage the large things in life? Ideas lead to choices, and choices lead to consequences. Will you be the frog in the pot, or will you be the one that shuts down the fire?